To another video. Purple Political Talk here. Today is Tuesday, July 13th, 2021, and today we're going to be discussing the 2024 presidential election and take a look at yet another possible scenario for this race. This being the scenario between former Vice President Mike Pence and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So this matchup is going to be very interesting as you see Pence has garnered some support among certain groups of people that maybe did not like Trump, and even among some Democrats, but are still some more conservatives. And that's going to be interesting to see how that kind of Pence brand of conservatism will face against someone like AOC, who is a known Democratic socialist, or pretty much, for simple terms, a socialist. So that's going to be very interesting to see in a matchup. Before we do that, though, I want to remind you guys to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get started with the video. So this matchup, again, like I said, would be interesting, and you would see certain shifts from what you would traditionally see in a lot of these races. There's certain states where I see AOC doing a little worse than some people think. I see her, and I see some states where Pence could actually underperform expectations as well. You see, both of these candidates have one thing that I think is going to be interesting to see. They really have that unknown factor in certain ways of how they would run their national campaign, and really what areas of the country will come out for them, especially because one of the big things that we've seen in recent elections is populism goes a long way in elections. So, with Mike Pence not being the big populist as Donald Trump was, it might hurt him against a known populist in the country. Where, in the big scheme of things, being a populist in the United States, you're running in a nationwide race will help you, because a lot of people are just tired of the establishment. And in a certain way, Mike Pence is establishment Republican. I think that he politically aligns more to the Christian right of the party. So that's kind of where I think he lies. So I think that a nationwide perspective, that's going to be interesting to see where the independent voters end up going. So I just filled in all our safe states. We have Mike Pence at 125 electoral votes and AOC at 183. Again, these are states that you would expect, like always, going to be blue. Northeast, West Coast, Illinois for the Democrats. You can't forget Hawaii. And then the big, Northwest region up here. And then the kind of South area, of course, would traditionally always go for the GOP. So now that we've gotten these states out of the way, let's start discussing some of the toss-up states and see where they're lying. Let's start off with the likely column. So in the likely column, I think that AOC is going to do very well in places like Colorado, places like Virginia. I would go as far as saying as places like New Mexico as well. The big things that these states have in common is that the establishment Democrat has done traditionally well there. And although AOC is certainly not a traditional establishment Democrat, she's going to run like one, especially when you have someone like Mike Pence, who has this political persona that it's far from establishment, although in certain ways he does have the establishment type politicians, some of that persona. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be interesting. With that being said, places like Virginia, Colorado, and New Mexico that have traditionally voted very, very Republican or Democrat for years and years now. I mean, it's been almost 12 years. It's going to be 16 years since a Republican won in Virginia, since a Republican won in Colorado and New Mexico. So I think it's safe to say that these states are going to be likely by then. And just as Hispanic vote in Colorado and New Mexico, we can see that going. And in Virginia, it's more of the Northern Virginia voters that are going to be carrying that election for EOC. Now, for Mike Pence, I see him doing very well in this home region of his, the Midwest. You see, I think that Mike Pence is going to have a pretty good run in places like Iowa, Ohio, Texas, and I'll go as far as saying Florida as well. So these states, again, very interesting. If you've seen a lot of my other election predictions, this is like one of the areas that the Republicans have begun to, I think, solidify, except maybe with the exception of Texas, with the right candidate, most likely Joe Biden. You could see that getting super close in 2024, if not even flipped. So I think that's where this region of the country stands. You see, Iowa and Ohio, I think this is what Mike Pence is going to do his best. This is going to be his best region for in like swing states, just based on the fact that he's from the area. He appeals to the Republican voters here. The amount of appeal that Mike Pence is going to have into those voters is it's going to be pretty big compared to somewhere down south. You see, Mike Pence has a Midwestern appeal that's hard to beat. And another thing that he does have, and indeed it will help him moving forward, is that evangelical appeal. Those are appeals that, those are appeals that are important for the Republicans. And they're not as safe as you think. There's a lot of evangelical voters who split away from Trump in 2020. So I think that's something that the Republicans should definitely take a look at getting back. And that's really going to help them in areas like Iowa and Ohio. So, yeah. And now going down south, to Texas and Florida, it really comes down to AOC is not the right type of Democrat to win in these states. Florida is going to be a long shot for a Democrat to win. Anyways, that does not mean that it's going to be in the safe margin, but probability-wise, it's likely going to be going to the Republicans. As far as AOC goes in the state, she is a known socialist. Basing on current situations in Florida, the anti-socialist, it's that feeling is insane in the state of Florida. Everywhere from Miami to Orlando, even Tampa. Big cities that were traditionally more Republican or Democratic, they're going to be turning towards the Republicans based on, these messages that AOC does bring. And I can't fail to remind you guys that just today at the time of filming, Cubans on the island and here in Miami, Florida, they're going out and protesting against that regime, and that is dictatorship. All of this is negative press for the socialists because Cuba is known as one of the most socialist places in the world. And, moving forward, I think that in places like Florida, if the Democrats have this message with people like AOC and Bernie Sanders or your Rashida Tlaibs, they're leading that messaging and they look like they're mainstream Democrats, which they're really not. I think that's one of the mistakes a lot of people make, that when they characterize the Democrats, they think it's all the AOC wing of the party, but that's far from the reality. However, remember, politics is about perception, not reality, and the perception is that the socialists are the leaders of the Democratic Party. Therefore, Florida will go Republican. Texas, again, like I said, it matters who the candidate is. So enough of a little bit of a going off of why socialism will affect the Democrats, and it's just a perception thing more than anything. So now that we've gotten the likely states out of the way, let's move on to the states that are going to be a little bit closer. The lean states are states that would go by less than 5%, but more than 1.5%. So, for AOC, she's going to have some of these states. I think that, in Minnesota and Nevada, I don't think that Mike Pence is the type of candidate to win in Nevada. And to be frank, amongst Democrats, the excitement might be high in Nevada. The whole party's been taken over by Democratic Socialists, to say the least. So in the state of Nevada. So I think that that's really going to help out AOC when it comes to bringing that Democratic enthusiasm. And I think that, one, it's not really worth it for Mike Pence, but two, the big reality is that, Mike Pence at that level, going out into these types of voters, I don't think he's going to do very well. You see, Mike Pence, if he does win this election, which I'm going to get into, as we move forward through the prediction, going to be the Midwest, going to be his key to the White House. So that's the first the state, I think. And then Minnesota, liberal state, it's moving further to the left. Yes, there might be some trends in parts of the state that may be moving a little bit towards the right. Mostly this Western congressional district we saw flip. But with that said, we cannot fail to identify the fact that, Minnesota is a state that in the inner city, in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, the African-American vote is through the roof. you have very high liberal sentiment in the state, and the Democrats are just frankly popular. Even though Mike Pence could come and take that western part of the state, I still see AOC winning this by around 4%. So this kind of puts where I think AOC would stop at the lean margin. Let's go over to Mike Pence. So Mike Pence, I think that honestly, he's going to do very well down in certain parts of the South. You see, AOC is not the type of candidate to win down South. I think that for her to win a presidential race, you're going to have to give it a couple years, because I think at the end of the day, that socialist message doesn't really appeal well down there. And I mean, if you think about it, down South, there aren't any major socialist, if you realize, okay, who are the big members of the squad? They are from northern states. So in the Sun Belt, those messages, just because these states have been traditionally more Republican, they're going to stick a little bit more with the Republicans, for the long term. With that being said, Georgia's a state that could go to AOC based off the African-American vote, especially because of Stacey Abrams, strategic, positioning for, those votes. That truly, I do think that, the AOC does have a chance of winning here. But again, country club Republicans who flipped from Trump in 2016 to Biden in 2020, those types of voters could be back. And with that being said, I also think that states like Arizona, down in the Sun Belt, will be flipping towards the Republicans, giving Mike Pence an edge when it comes to the electoral count. He really does only have to win one of the Rust Belt states to win the election from here on out, and I think he does that in a lean margin. You see, I think he could do very good things in the state of Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, where he can, get in those margins, go get a lot of those working class voters. A big part of the story that a lot of the people do not tell about Trump in 2016 is that Mike Pence actually had a lot more to do with his victory up in the industrial Midwest compared to what he's given credit for. You see, Mike Pence has that appeal, and Trump did have that appeal, but Mike Pence, to a certain extent did help. Again, he's not the populist that would, take this race by storm. However, the socialist message is not mainstream enough to the point where AOC could go out and win the race. So those are all the lean states for the Republican Party. Let's talk about the tilt states at this point. These are going to be the states that are going to be the closest of the closest, less than 1.5% margin. That's going to be very tight races. I actually forgot to fill these in. I think that Mike Pence would win these by lean margins. These are Republican states, conservative districts. AOC won't fare off very well in those states. Now, going on to our actual tilt states, you see, I think that AOC does have a chance of winning in Michigan, but I don't think she's going to be able to win Grand Rapids or at least stay put to the number that she needs to win. I think with some Detroit suburbs and things like that, this is super close to Mike Pence's home state in Indiana. I really do think that Michigan could end up voting for Mike Pence, and I think it's somewhere that, the Republicans have the potential to move forward if they run the right candidates, and the Democrats run the wrong candidates. In this case, I think AOC is the wrong candidate to run in the race. Finally, let's go on to the state of New Hampshire. The state of New Hampshire, I really do think that it will narrowly go to Mike Pence. AOC probably doesn't have the greatest appeal here. You see, she has to appeal to the college-educated voters. They pretty much, are this district. And I think that two things come into mind. First, that democratic socialist message doesn't really appeal to those college-educated voters, so I don't think they're really going to fare off to go to AOC. And the other thing is that I think that a lot of these college-educated voters will gain some respect, or have gained some respect for Mike Pence, for that matter, for, standing up to Trump on those last days of Trump's presidency. Now, how prevalent will that be in the race? I don't know, because moving forward, I'm not sure how important or not important Trump's 4 years are going to be in, 2024. I'm going to say that they're going to have some importance, but I think at the end of the day, Mike Pence just came out a lot more favorable than Trump from that presidential election. And if you put him against a candidate like AOC, it's clear who would win the race. So this is my final prediction: 311 for Pence and 227 for AOC. Very interesting prediction. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. Also, I wanted to tell you guys that I will be going live today at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, just doing a little quick political Q&A. If you guys want to go check that out, 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Purple Political Talk. That is it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye.